Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to another Quran study. God willing, today we'll be starting from Surah 22, verse 26. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Pilgrimage, like all other duties in Islam decreed through Abraham. We appointed Abraham to establish the shrine. You shall not idolize any other god beside me, and purify my shrine for those who visit it, those who live near it, and those who bow and prostrate. And proclaim that the people shall observe the Hajj pilgrimage. They will come to you walking or riding on various exhausted means of transportation. They will come from the farthest locations. They may seek commercial benefits and shall commemorate God's name during the specified days for providing them with livestock. Eat therefrom and feed the despondent and the poor. They shall complete their obligations, fulfill their vows, and visit the ancient shrine. And the footnote says, Abraham was the original messenger of submission, Islam, C 2278 and Appendix 9. So praise be to God. We see from these verses that God, gave the Hajj to Abraham. Hajj was decreed, given to Abraham, as we can see, decreed by God. Abraham was the original messenger of submission, so all the religious practices of submission were given to Abraham, and we can see that Abraham was told to proclaim to the people to observe the Hajj pilgrimage, and just like other practices, he was proclaimed to tell people. And then God says they will come to you walking or riding on various exhausted means of transportation, as we can see from the farthest locations. And it's amazing, like, when you go to Mecca, you see people from every nation, coming to, visit. It's almost like it's like a magnet that's drawing people from, everywhere in the world. So God says, you may seek commercial benefits, and people shall commemorate God's name during the specified days for providing them with livestock. So it's not wrong to, while you're there, to also engage in trade and stuff. There's, it's almost like a melting pot for people from different countries, so they come. So, it can be used as a trade hub as well, and for people to be able to do that. And that's what people did in the past as well. And God says, they shall complete their obligations, fulfill their vows, and visit the ancient shrine. So once in a lifetime, Hajj is a responsibility that, we have to do for those who can afford it. And God says, you shall visit the ancient shrine, which is referring to the Kaaba here. So God will now continue reading verse 29. It says, they shall complete their obligations, fulfill their vows, and visit the ancient shrine. Those who reverence the rites decreed by God have deserved a good reward at their Lord. All livestock is made lawful for your food, except for those specifically prohibited for you. You shall avoid the abomination of idol worship and avoid bearing false witness. You shall maintain your devotion absolutely to God alone. Anyone who sets up any idols beside God is like the one who fell from the sky, then gets snatched by vultures or blown away by the wind into a deep ravine. And so, God is reminding us the importance of remembering God alone, for reverencing God, and those who reverence the rites decreed by God. We are supposed to reverence these rites, right? There are people who say that these rites do not exist or are not decreed by God. There's many people that proclaim that, for example, that say that Hajj is just supposed to be like a conference, like, for example, Adib Yüksel, who used to be a submitter and was there at the time of the messenger and decided to proclaim otherwise and preach it to a lot of people, and there's other people that think that there should be no Hajj and other things like that, and so but we understand that this is a religious practice that was given to him, and it is mathematically confirmed as a legitimate practice of submission, also by God's messenger of the covenant, who was the third messenger of submission, whose job was to provide the mathematical evidence of all the practices of submission of Islam or submission, right? So he did that, and Hajj is part of that, and you can read more about it in Appendix 15. And so the idol worship, first of all, we're reminded also that all livestock is made lawful for our food except those specifically prohibited for you. And the livestock that is except for those specifically prohibited for you, the only livestock that is prohibited for you is anything that falls into the category of four meats that are prohibited, right? Obviously, you can't say that pork is or pig is livestock, really, technically. So that's not part of that. But like if animal dies on its own, for example, or running blood, or animals that are dedicated to anyone besides God, right? So those would be the three cases where livestock would not fall under the category of livestock that is lawful for us. And then also we're reminded about the avoid the abomination of idol worship. So that's definitely animals that are dedicated to other than God. That's idol worship, right? So that's an abomination, and so we're supposed to stay away from that. And then, God willing, I will continue reading. Says you shall maintain your devotion absolutely to God alone, right? In verse 31 finally, and God gives us a very good example of someone who fell from the sky, then gets snatched by the vulture. So imagine, someone is like soaring high up in the sky, right? And then right after that, they get snatched by the vultures, and that's the example of people committing idol worship, who fall from a very secure place, right? And then they're snatched by vultures. I mean, these devils, or Satan, who catches his prey. We become victims of Satan, and basically, then we're just game for him to just fulfill his purpose and drag people to hell. So it says, gets snatched up by vultures or gets blown away by the wind into a deep ravine, right? So then just basically drown, after being, tossed around, everywhere, which sounds pretty brutal also. So obviously, that's an allegory, right? But we have to understand that that's what idol worship does. It really takes us from a very secure place and to an eternity of misery, and to eternal misery, basically, which is something that, obviously we know heaven and hell are eternal. And imagine someone, doing all the righteous works and then falling in idol worship by doing something. And it's very easy, right? We think that we just have to worship idols. No, there's so many ways that you can fall into idol worship. One way would be to follow another source besides the Quran, How simple is that, right? People are falling for that left and right, even people who know that they're supposed to follow the Quran alone. Somehow Satan manages to, sway these people on his side. And so we have to be careful of that. And so God says in verse 32, indeed, those who reverence the rights decreed by God demonstrate the righteousness of their hearts. So people who reverence the rights decreed by God demonstrate the righteousness of their hearts, right? So the righteous people are the ones who will be doing these things, and people who don't care about these rights obviously shows that they are not righteous. Livestock offerings during pilgrimage. Verse 33. The livestock provide you with many benefits for a period before being donated to the ancient shrine. For each congregation we have decreed rites whereby they commemorate the name of God for providing them with the livestock. Your God is one and the same God. You shall all submit to him. Give good news to the obedient. They are the ones whose hearts tremble upon mentioning God. They steadfastly persevere during adversity. They observe the contact prayer, salat, and from our provisions to them they give to charity. The animal offerings are among the rites decreed by God for your own good. And when it says for your own good, there is a footnote here. And it says, animal offerings from the pilgrims conserve the resources at pilgrimage site. Note that almost 2 million pilgrims converge on Mecca during pilgrimage. Now, number now is a lot higher. But regardless, a lot of people converge there, right? So it can easily deplete the resources that are available for the population that is there because so many people. And so this is God's system that, he says that when that happens, just going to Mecca, like outside of the pilgrimage period itself, is there. You see a lot of people, and you see a lot of people from other outside, right? But then during Hajj, it's a lot worse. And it's a lot of people, and so obviously when so many people come all at the same time, you need food to feed these people, and this is why this is one of the commandments that they have to offer animal sacrifice as part of the Hajj. Now we see that there's an innovation around this, which is when it comes time for Hajj, after these people, first of all, they change the timing for the Hajj. They alter the sacred months, and then they restrict Hajj in a very specific period, which in itself is so bad. As we know, God says that it is wrong. But also, people during that time when that period is over, everyone, whether they're doing Hajj or not, or whether they even intended to do Hajj at that time, will just buy animals, put them in their backyard, and everybody just sacrifices animals. Like other places which is not a part of the commandment. So can you offer animals as sacrifices any period of day? Any period of the year? Yes, you can. But the thing is, they're doing it wrong because they're saying this is a religious commandment given to them. So it's an innovation at that point, and it's not something that is decreed by God, but it is decreed by God for people who actually go to Hajj, right, and who are actually doing the sacrifice there. And you also know from that when they do that unnecessarily, and all the Muslims end up rushing to buy these animals, and the price of the animals shoot up, because of the huge demand, and they're expensive, and then other people who don't have the money feel obligated to do something, to spend the money to buy an entire animal, and then there's show off. People buy more animals than other people. Some people buy more expensive animals to show they have more. And there's so much bad around that, right? So we understand that the main point that I'm trying to make here is that we should remember that that's not a commandment that is given to us by God. It's only for when you are going to Hajj that you're supposed to do that. But not otherwise. And it says, you shall mention God's name on them while they're standing in line. Once they're offered for sacrifice, you shall eat therefrom and feed the poor and the needy. This is why we subdued them for you, that you may show your appreciation. Neither their meat nor their blood reaches God. What reaches him is your righteousness. He has subdued them for you, that you may show your appreciation, like glorifying God for guiding you. Give good news to the charitable. So as we know that when we sacrifice an animal, we're supposed to mention God's name upon it, and the Messenger of the Covenant has explained that entire process in terms of why we're supposed to mention God's name, because you're basically taking the life of an animal, as he explains, and you're sending it back to God, and so you're supposed to mention God's name, and it says, and then again it talks about feeding the poor and the needy, right? And so it's interesting that when like these people that offer these sacrifices in other countries, they barely, like most of them, barely even do that for the poor and the needy. It talks about feeding the poor and the needy. They're just doing it like, they just send the meat out to like their neighbors, their friends, mostly. And then if they have like a little bit left over here and there, they will want to give it to the poor and the needy. And it says, neither your blood or your meat or their meat reaches God, right? So it's interesting when you think about it, like people when they're sacrificing, these animals, like the sacrifice is, nothing, none of that whole thing, none of that reaches God. But what reaches God is the act of you reverencing the rights that are decreed by God and you doing them to be redeemed by God, right? And so, but it almost becomes satanic when the idol worshippers are doing it, obviously as an innovation, right? And so, but we understand from reading from the perspective of a submitter and how it is explained by the Quran, it makes perfect sense to conserve the food resources around that site for a concentrated period of time where people are converging, from all around the world to Hajj. And you're supposed to offer the animal sacrifice at that time. Also, it's important to remember that, if you have, like, say, your own animals, like, say, you have a animal farm or not, but, you decided to go hunt and, sacrifice an animal to eat, then you're supposed to pronounce God's name on it. But when you buy it from a store, for example, on a daily basis, it doesn't matter if they don't pronounce God's name on it, but as long as you mention God's name when you eat them. But if you're sacrificing the animal yourself, you're killing the animal yourself, you have to mention God's name on it because, again, you're taking permission from God to send the animal back to his creator. And this is a commandment that, we have to do it at that time. So God will continue reading verse 38. God defends the believers. God defends those who believe. God does not love any betrayer unappreciative. So we can see that, God says these are the commandments given to us, and then he has subdued these animals for us to show our appreciation by glorifying God, right? And so there's two ways we could show our appreciation. We could show our appreciation to God by just thanking God verbally, but we could also show it by our actions, and by our actions, we're glorifying God, we're obeying God, we're observing the commandments, and that's how you truly appreciate God, and you appreciate God by, appreciating the gifts that God has given us, So these religious practices are gifts from God, and you show your appreciation by doing that, right? I mean, imagine the people that think that they are Muslims, the so-called Muslims, and they appreciate the things that God gives them, but they don't appreciate by their action. They only appreciate by their lip service, and then they basically have Muhammad and all these other idols on top of that, right? And then they also don't observe the commandments, many of the people. So that doesn't show any appreciation, obviously that shows that these people are disbelievers and these people are unappreciative, they're idol worshippers, and their works are nullified as a result of that, right? And so God nullifies all their righteous works because you're here for one and only purpose, which is to worship God alone. And if you do everything else and you didn't do that one thing that God wants you to do, you basically failed the test, and those people will end up in hell. And so God says he does not love any betrayer unappreciative. So betrayers, obviously you're betraying God if you side with Satan, right? And siding with Satan, Satan basically wants people to commit idol worship, and we know that devil is the other alternative. So you don't really have to be a Satan worshiper, quote unquote, to be a Satanist to follow Satan. You can just commit idol worship and you're following Satan. You can just worship Jesus or worship Muhammad or worship your ego, and you can easily be worshiping Satan, right? So when people talk about worshiping Satan, I mean, you don't have to be adherent of one of those rituals. I mean, you could do the same thing. That's also idol worship, right? Clearly, but there's so much idol worship around us, so much Satan worshiping Satanists. I mean, people around us worshiping Satan, more common than meets the eye, basically. And God will now continue with verse 39. Synagogues, churches, and masjids. Permission is granted to those who are being persecuted, since injustice has befallen them, and God is certainly able to support them. They were evicted from their homes unjustly for no reason other than saying, "Our Lord is God." Excuse me. If it were not for God's supporting of some people against others, monasteries, churches, synagogues, and masjids, where the name of God is commemorated frequently, would have been destroyed. Excuse me. Absolutely, God supports those who support Him. God is powerful, almighty. So God, first of all, this verse talks about synagogues, churches, and masjids, which is very surprising, to someone when they first read the Quran, right? Like, why is God referring to synagogues? If these people are not worshiping God, the churches where people are committing idol worship, God says, any place of worship that's not dedicated to God alone. Masjid specifically, let's say, that's not dedicated to God alone, is a masjid of Satan, right? Because that's a place that Satan uses to promote his worship, right? He uses these places to propagate his rebellion against God, and promoting the idol worship, right? But then at the same time, we see that these are places where it says God's name is commemorated frequently, right? So there's still people that are commemorating God, and people who will worship God alone will come out from those places too, right? So they are like you can almost say, for some people, it's like a gateway for them to come into true worship of God alone and submission to God alone, right? There's people that are seeking the path, and I'm sure many of us here would have one point or another have frequented one of those places to worship God, while we were on our way to submission. But now we realize that we don't need to go there, so we're not supposed to go there just because it says here that masjids, churches, and synagogues are places where God's name is commemorated. I mean, we are not supposed to pray there still. And now that we understand, if any place that is, where practices of submission are not dedicated, where practices of religion are not dedicated to God alone, belongs to Satan. But you can still go in if you have to, but you're not supposed to still pray there. But still, these are places where, relatively speaking, I mean, there are people that are commemorating God, and there will be people that are more peaceful than people, let's say, who are just killing each other, I mean, like in bars and things like that, right? Or just openly committing bad things. They're relatively more peaceful. Not that they don't do it. I mean, of course, we see a lot of that happening around us. A lot of people committing sins inside those places as well, unfortunately. But, there are people that are also commemorating God frequently. It's part of, everything is in accordance with God's will. And so it's part of God's system, to have these places around for people to be tested for as long as it takes, and we know that later on when submission prevails, a lot of these places, like especially masjids, we understand will be rededicated to God alone, right? And so they still obviously need to exist for that reason. And so God says, if it were not for God's supporting of some people against the others, these places would have been destroyed. So God is the one who's keeping this very, delicate intricate balance in place of like forces to allow these places to exist, because it's up to human beings when you understand like how they don't want places like for example, like the Jews don't even want churches to exist, right? I mean, they openly say that. For example, in Israel, there are Jews that would want to destroy all the churches, and they have been advocating that. And we understand the amount of destruction these people have caused, and how they don't even listen to their own allies when it comes to their religion, their religious rituals. But in this case, they can't do it. I mean, they still try every now and then, right? But for the most part, they're not able to do it, right? And we see that this is because of God. God prevents them from doing these things. And the righteous people, this is God willing, I will continue. Verse 41, it says, there are those whom if we appointed as rulers on earth, they would establish the contact prayer, salat, and the obligatory charity, zakat, and would advocate righteousness and forbid evil. God is the ultimate ruler. And so these are the people that are the believers, right? God says He defends the believers. So the believers, if God appointed them as rulers on earth, would establish the contact prayers and obligatory charity, and would advocate righteousness and forbid evil, right? So they would use their influence to preach the worship of God alone, right? I mean, obviously, because there is no compulsion in religion. So let's say if they became rulers, in any part of the world, they will not force people to observe these things, but they will, maybe establish mosques and things like that, and advocate righteousness. It says advocate righteousness and forbid evil, right? So advocating righteousness and forbidding evil is, greatly abused by people in power. Like you have these, Islamic governments, right? And then they impose, a distorted version of charity, zakat, on everybody, right? I mean, so they think that they have to do it like once a year in a very specific category, but still, then when that happens, they mandate it that money is deducted from the banks of these people, that they take 2.5%. Like it says, you have a balance of a certain amount sitting in the bank, and I think they do it around the time of the month of Muharram and stuff. And so what people do then is when it's around time for that period of time, they take their money out, all of their money out, so they don't even have to pay charity once a year. And then once the period is over, I think it's 5 or 10 days or something, and then they put their money back into their accounts, right? So, but anyways, so when it talks about the advocating of righteousness, forbidding evil, so we have to understand what that means, right? You cannot impose it on people, but you can advocate, right? As much as you like. You can advocate to people to be righteous, and you can, when it says forbid evil, you let them know that something is wrong and they shouldn't do it. But that doesn't mean that, let's say you can ban alcohol, for example. People have to or punish them, if they do that, right? I mean, this is not God's system. God wants people to be free, to choose what they want, and if they want to, commit some kind of act of idol worship or disobey God, that's their choice then, right? If God says people want to disbelieve, let them disbelieve. I mean, who are they gonna affect at the end of the day? They're themselves, right? I mean, you can advise people to do the right thing. And then if they don't do it, that's, at least you did your part by reminding them, right? But for example, for people who don't even do that, then God says these people are as guilty as they are, right? But obviously, they have to just do their part, remind the people, and then move on. And as it says in verse 42, as we read along, it says, if they reject you, the people of Noah, Ad, and Thamud have also disbelieved before them. Also the people of Abraham and the people of Lot, and the dwellers of Midian. Moses was also rejected. I led all of these people on, then I called them to account. How devastating was my requital. Many a community have we annihilated because of their wickedness. They ended up in ruins, stilled wells, and great empty mansions. Did they now roam the earth, then use their minds to understand, and use the ears to hear? Indeed, the real blindness is not the blindness of the eyes, but the blindness of the hearts inside the chests. They challenge you to bring retribution, and God never fails to fulfill his prophecy. A day of your Lord is like 1,000 of your years. Many a community in the past committed evil, and I led them on for a while. Then I punished them. To me is the ultimate destiny. So we see that, God says that, if they disbelieve you, that's, fine. And it doesn't affect God in any way. It's the people who are just hurting themselves, right? And God gives the example of the people of Ad, the people of Noah, the people of Thamud, where God sent messengers, people of Abraham, people of Lot, Moses. All these people, were powerful on earth, most of them. And, they were reminded by God, and they didn't listen. And God allowed them, he led them on. People are given, in this world, people are given enough rope to hang themselves, right? And, you see these messengers and prophets being patient, even though a lot of them had resources. But, God says just be patient. And, when their time comes, then, God deals with these people. So eventually, when we see disbelievers, hypocrites, idol worshippers, and if you really closely pay attention and observe, all these people are allowed to live and enjoy, and they're led on. They're led to think that nobody's watching them. They're led to do whatever they want. So people are led to commit evil and everything. Once they do all the acts, criminal acts, it's just there to provide themselves with the proof against themselves. So when they go to hell at the end of their life, they're not going to question God for putting them in hell. Or, they basically put themselves to hell on their own volition. We understand that, God does not put anyone to hell, and these people go to hell, unfortunately, on their own. And then God says that, all these communities that were annihilated as a result, they ended up in ruins. You still can find remnants of, the destruction and, signs of the, for example, the people of Pharaoh. You can still go and see the body of Pharaoh in the museum in Cairo, Egypt. And you can see, for example, Lot and, what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah and their destruction. And so, when you remind these people, for example, let them do whatever they want, if these people want to, preach falsehood, let them preach falsehood to whomever they want. And that's basically fine. They can do whatever they want. And then on the day of judgment, they're going to be held accountable for everything. And not only, we don't even have to wait to the day of judgment. These people are requited and they pay in this world for the choices that people make. When people don't observe God, they pay the price for their own happiness. They get disasters in their life. They're never satisfied. They're never happy. And they're never able to enjoy their life. Even if you give them all the wealth in the world, they may temporarily have sprouts here and there of, temporary enjoyment where they may pretend to be happy and, give this illusion that they're having a good time. But they're just miserable inside still. They're shrunken souls. Excuse me. They're shrunken souls, And a soul that is devoid of God, inside is not going to be happy. And so they pretend that they're having a good time. And from the outside, it may seem like, they have all the luxuries of the world. But, these luxuries will not bring them any happiness. And eventually they have to part company with those luxuries when they leave this world. Nobody takes these things with them anyways. And eventually they're just going to go to God on their own, and all they have is their soul. Now, if that soul is the size of a kitten or it's in the negative, that soul is basically, doomed. And so these people will have to pay, and there's just regret and remorse, as we understand. And so God says, did they not roam the earth and note the consequences of these people? I mean, because you can still go around, as I said, and visit these sites, ancient sites, and you can still see what God did to these people. All a lot of their signs have been preserved by God in accordance with His will, right? So and they see that, right? Like, for example, the Jews can go and see that Pharaoh's body is preserved there. The Muslims can go see that. Anybody can go see it, right? But they're not taking any heed. The people are not taking any heed. They're still going on. I mean, and they're still debating, for example, like why the sea parted, like looking for alternative explanations in terms of science to try to explain it. Like not looking at the fact that God drowned Pharaoh and why the flood came. I mean, why did it come? Even if it happened like for some very rational scientific reason, like why did it happen at that time as soon as Pharaoh stepped and his army stepped into the water, right? They don't have an explanation for that, of course, right? They could come up with many different scenarios why, the sea parted at that time. But they can't tell you why it happened at that particular instance when these people were being trapped. And so then verse 47 says, verse 46, it says at the end, says, indeed, the real blindness is not the blindness of the eyes. So we think the real blindness is when people can't see with their eyes. No, the real blindness is when the hearts inside the chest cannot see. I mean, it is something to see, and it's like, and you show these serious proofs to these people, and when their hearts are blinded, what you can expect is amazing. Like, you show them the verses of Quran, you show them the proof, and they will laugh at you, right? And what is that? It says the blindness of the heart. When the hearts are numb completely to God. When you say God, nothing happens. These people are completely divinely, like isolated in a way. There's divine intervention. There are traps all around them where they can't see anything, they can't feel anything. People will kill for other things, and they will not feel it because their hearts are shielded by their sins. They're just so corroded with all the sins that they can't see any light. Like, for example, God talks about rocks that cringe out of reverence for God and streams gush out, right? But these hearts, nothing happens, because they're blinded. I mean, your soul has to have some light in it for you to be able to feel any reverence for God, but the soul is like non-existent, practically. And so at that time, nothing phases these people. And no matter how many times you try to warn these people or advise these people, they're not going to take heed. And of course, they're going to end up paying for their sins on the Day of Judgment. Verse 49, God's messenger of the covenant. Say, O people, I have been sent to you as a profound warner. Those who believe and lead a righteous life have deserved forgiveness and a generous recompense. As for those who strive to challenge our revelations, they incur hell. And then the footnote for 22:49 says, this command is directed specifically to God's messenger of the covenant. This fact and the specific name of the messenger are mathematically coded into the Quran. Excuse me. See the details together with irrefutable proofs in appendices 2 and 26. So God's messenger of the covenant is mentioned in the Quran. His name is mathematically coded in the Quran, and there's several proofs. If you look at Appendix 2 and Appendix 26, I mean, it's filled with so many proofs, So it's very, it's really ridiculous when people cannot accept the simple fact, and that Rashad Khalifa, the name, has been mathematically coded into the Quran. And you can see several proofs in Appendix 2 and Appendix 26. And God says here that, say, "O people, I have been sent to you as a profound warner, and those who believe and lead a righteous life deserve forgiveness, and those who strive to challenge our revelations, they incur hell." So people actually, and so it's interesting how this is even mentioned. People strive, but they strive to do what? They strive to challenge God's revelations. So they strive. There's people that are striving to go to heaven, and there's people that are striving to go to hell. God doesn't put anybody to hell. People insist on going to hell, right? So you don't have to come up with say an elaborate plan to build places of worship for Satan or something like that to strive to go to hell, right? I mean, you can easily strive to go to hell by just simply committing idol worship. So these people are really on a daily basis, they're striving to challenge God's revelations. So there's people that are actually scheming to challenge God's revelations. They go and look up and study arguments on how they can challenge God's revelations. And it's not just something that is limited to someone who's not a submitter, or someone who's not familiar with the Quran, right? People can go and strive to challenge God's revelations. Let's say, for example, God says that only 4 meats are prohibited, and people go out of their way to challenge the revelations, and look through materials, to try to challenge that, right? I mean, that's an example, right? Or people go through the material and go through many verses in the Quran and go through the verses in the Bible, to try to challenge the fact that circumcision is not a part of our religion, and you have other, classic examples of, people trying to challenge God's revelations by coming up with absurd ideas or, going to other sources, etc. And this is how, people have gone against the message of submission, gone against the message of the messenger of the covenant, strive to challenge. Another example would be, people who are striving to minimize, the work of the messenger of the covenant, trying to put doubt in people's hearts to try to make them think that the messenger had his own personal opinions that he was preaching to people, that he preached falsehood, his own personal opinion, and put doubts in people's hearts because they may have personal issues in accepting certain commandments from God. So instead of killing their ego and observing God, they strive to challenge the revelations, and they go out of their way to do that, as we know. So may God allow us to not be one of those people. It's very easy for us to fall victim to that type of thing, and Satan will come from the right and from the left, and so we have to be mindful of that. That when we look at God's revelations and the commandments, we understand them correctly. It's imperative that we understand what those commandments are, and understand that the Quran is complete, perfect, and fully detailed. And that if people try to bring other commandments or other practices that are not part of our religion, we know that we're supposed to only follow God's message, and we stick to the message, right? And anything else is supposed to be discarded. May God allow us to do that and recognize God's revelations and to be on the right path. And with that, God willing, I will end. And if you guys, I went over board 5 minutes. So sorry about that. So if you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free. Thank you. God bless you too. Any comments or questions, please feel free. So guys, anybody has any comments or any questions?
All I'll say is, like, in an agreement to you, brother, it is amazing how God's enemies come from the left and the right and, like, study, like, do their best to try to take away from God's word. And, it's good to be vigilant against that. So it was a good reminder, brother, 100%.
Yeah, and we can see, or how God these disbelieving communities on, or their people, when they think it's kind of reminds me of that other verse in the Quran about describing like who the worst losers are. Because you got like the Jews, and not just to single out the Jews, but I mean any community, but they think they're doing something good, or they think they somehow convince themselves of their wrong ways. They're utterly convinced. But I mean, we can see in verse 44 that God will lead them on, and then He calls them to account. And the requital is going to be devastating. So, yeah.
Not only that, like, how blind they are, right? Like, a lot of their beliefs are clearly contradictory to the scripture that they propagate. And yet, like, when you point out these contradictions, they double down, right? Like, they make very, like, I call it mind gymnastics, right? Like, it doesn't follow logic. They say, well, if, this, that, and the other thing, and then, they bring up other objections like, well, you got to bring it on belief, or, my favorite, because I'm not a native Arabic speaker. Well, you don't know Arabic. You don't know the real translation, right? They go through all these mind gymnastics to bring up, like, to propagate their falsehood when it's clearly contradictory to what they say they believe, right?
Anybody else has any comments, questions? All right. So, I guess if there are no questions about the verses we read, well, there should be a lot of questions actually, but
I had a lot of, or I guess, questions about the first page you read from
uh-huh,
26 to 37, but
uh-huh.
I mean, during the study, you did a good job on answering
Thank you, mashallah.
stuff that had come to mind.
Okay, mashallah.
Yeah, good explanations about Hajj, the pilgrimage, and yeah, the sacrificing too, because I've wondered about that before. And, yeah, it's right. It's very clear, in the Quran for us. But as you mentioned, we can see how the Arabs and the traditional Muslims, as it's practiced today, how much they deviate. And yeah. Also, I like the verse or the part where it reminds us to be thankful for God subduing these creatures. Because like sometimes I'm thinking, like, I mean, even a goat, like a cow, would is so enormous and heavy. And I mean, imagine like if you've ever seen, like, even they may move real slow, but like I've seen like a cow run one time, and it's like a really heavy and powerful creature. So I mean, imagine if like each time you go to sacrifice, you try to subdue these animals, like.
Yeah.
They start, bucking and kicking, and like every single one of them. I mean, how difficult it would be. Like it would be like such a tiresome burden to do this for every single time. And, I mean, thank God, so that's definitely a blessing that we have.
Praise be to God. Yeah, I mean, imagine a world without livestock, without dairy, without all these meat, delicious meats, we consume, there'll be no cheeseburgers, for sure. Because no cheese in there, no meat.
No drinking the coffee.
Yeah. And so these are God's. I mean, it's amazing how, like, exactly like, you said, like, God has subdued them for us. Like, their whole mission in life is to just eat, for us. And they don't. They're so submissive in the sense of, if you want to keep them, they don't like try endlessly to run away from you or something, or they don't have wings or something.
Yeah, imagine if the cows had wings, they could fly.
Yeah.
Then we have to go chase them.
Yeah.
I had a question, and I just wanted to make sure that I understood correctly. So you mentioned that in like current times, the Hajj, like the time frame around it, has been altered or adjusted. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So we know from the Quran that there are 4 sacred months, right? And so those are the sacred months which is like occur consecutively, right? So you have the 12th month, lunar month, which is Zil-Hajj, and then you have the 1st, 2nd, and the 3rd month. So these are the 4 sacred months, as the Messenger of the Covenant has pointed out, that you're supposed to do the Hajj in, right? If you, maybe, I think it would be a good idea to go to appendix number 15. So if you go to appendix number 15, you can see that it talks about those sacred months, right? So, but the traditional Muslims, they have restricted it to just the month of Zil-Hajj, starting from, I think, like the 8th of Zil-Hajj, the 12th month. They allow people to come for Hajj for a period of like 10 days. So everybody has to perform Hajj during that period, according to them, right? But we understand that it's only supposed to be, it can be done within the 4 months. So God, I'm going to read from Appendix 15. This is page 433, where it says pilgrimage, Hajj and Umrah. So it says, once in a lifetime, Hajj and Umrah are decreed for those who can afford it. Pilgrimage commemorates Abraham's exemplary submission to God, Appendix 9, and must be observed during the 4 sacred months. So the names of those months are Zulhajj, Muharram, Safar, and Rabiul Awwal, or Rabi 1. And this is 12th month, and then the 1st, 2nd, and the 3rd months, right? So these are the months that you can do that, right? And so they have distorted it, and they have most Muslims observe Hajj during a few days in Zulhijjah. So that is a very short period of time where they expect the entire population to do a Hajj, right? And that's not what God really intended. God has given these 4 sacred months, and it's obvious from the way they're mentioned in the Quran that they're supposed to be these 4 consecutive months. But the Muslims have altered the sacred months, right? So if you Google the sacred months in Islam, for example, you will see that they have this like disjointed period where they say it's Muharram, Zulqa'dah, and Zulhijjah and Rajab, right? And so those months, those do not represent the actual sacred months. And God says altering the sacred months is a sign of disbelief. So Muharram is the 1st month, right? Then Rajab is the 7th month, right? So there is a big disconnect. And then, so they have Zulhijjah, which is the 12th month, and then they have Muharram, which is the 1st month, but then they have Rajab, and then they have Zulqa'dah, which is the 11th month, right? So they have clearly, destroyed that system that God has put, and this is why you see during Hajj, like there are stampedes and things, and almost always, like I'm sure there's sometimes probably they don't even allow media to report certain things, but it causes a lot of chaos when people go to Hajj with there's so many people, right? And they're trying every day to like improve that, but obviously they're just doing it also to make money, right? When you concentrate Hajj during such a small period of time, there's a huge demand for, like, let's say hotels, right, and other resources, and so people shoot up their prices too. And it's more convenient for them because, let's say, like, they won't have to deal with traffic of, people and stuff like that. So, it's more convenient for them that people just do it in this small period of time and then it's over with, right? But as far as the people are concerned, like, I mean, even doing Umrah, requires a lot of effort, which you can do any time of the year. And so you have, Muslims coming to do Umrah all the time. I mean, even that is so crowded, And for me personally, I've only done Umrah, and I know, like, it's nearly impossible to navigate around those people. Like, it's very difficult, right? And so Hajj is even worse. Like, I would never, God willing, will never go for Hajj during this time when these other people are doing it, at the same time. It's pretty cramped. Well, it's an understatement, right? And so it's like really bad. Just even any other time of the year, and so it's hard to for me to imagine how people even do that. I mean, they're not even going to be able to focus on God because of it's so chaotic and it's so hot, and people can suffocate. People get sick all the time while they're there for Hajj and everything. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, brother.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
Welcome. So I did also have like an off-topic question, like I wanted to bring up. Like I wanted to discuss like a scenario. Let's say you have certain people that are proven hypocrites, right? And then you see someone that is let's say very nice to them, right? And is going and befriending them, and they feel that they don't find anything wrong with that. All right. So I mean, but then these people themselves may not show the most obvious signs of hypocrisy, right? But you see that they're clearly, constantly like befriending hypocrites and people like that, right? So I mean, how do you like in what category, I guess, you categorize these people, and how do you deal with such people, based on Quran? That's my question.
So, brother, these are proven hypocrites, and we know that they are hypocrites.
Mm-hmm.
And people who are, like, you mean people in the way that these people who are acting nice towards them, submitters who are acting nice towards them?
Yeah, I mean, let's say you've realized someone's a hypocrite, and I realize someone's a hypocrite, and it's been shown to us, like, by action, like these people were hypocrites.
I still befriend them.
And then there's people that still befriend them, and they don't find anything wrong with them. Like, and then if you tell them like they're hypocrites, they're like, no, how can you say they're hypocrites? I don't see them as hypocrites. And then they go and be nice to them and everything, right? So
yeah, how should we act towards those people, right?
yeah, I mean, like, we have many examples, if you think about it, right? Like situational examples where someone could have been exposed, and then you see, and then you even try to remind these people, and they don't take any heed. So, like, yeah.
Hey, brother, God says in the Quran clearly that if you befriend them, you are going to be like them.
Mm-hmm.
So the submitter, brother or sister, who is going to stay with them and what makes us submitters is that we do what God says, right? He says, run away from hypocrites, and you don't run away from hypocrites. Then at that point, you are not a submitter, because you don't submit to the command of God, right? You say,
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm going to run away from them.
Mm-hmm.
So you are clearly saying that you don't submit anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that person, the first act, he was a submitter, he becomes a non-submitter, and then if he still stays with those people and he befriends them, then he will become a hypocrite himself.
Mm-hmm.
So that means, my opinion is that if you warn such a person and he stays as it is, then probably in a very short time he will leave, or
Mm-hmm.
Because it's clear, right, that
Mm-hmm.
you are going to become one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they say they belong with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also it's a form of compromising too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a weak kind of cop out, in the sense that you could lie. You lie to yourself. You're like, oh no, these people are nice, or I'll just inch this close to this hypocrite. It's like, why would you want to be even associated with them? Because I mean, if you believed in the messenger, like what he tells us about our most ardent enemy, Satan, and how Satan is indeed a crybaby, and I mean, he'll look for anything. I mean, even if you don't think you're doing something wrong, I mean, which it is, it's a huge deal. So, but I mean, even from the perspective, if you yourself or this person can't see anything wrong with that, I mean, if he was like, if for me, I mean, if that was the case, like logic would say, okay, just stay on the side of caution. Let me not take that risk in association, because but I mean, it should be, it's not something that's small. So I mean, you're basically giving Satan a claim over you, because I mean, we have it all through the Quran. As Brother Jaffer just pointed out, we have they belong with each other, and then you become like them. So it's right. So I mean, for someone like that, I mean, they'll either leave by themselves, or I mean, they're on, I guess, thin ice, in the sense where it's like, okay, if they persist and continue in that way, I mean, they don't. I mean, all right, go join them. I mean, that's because if they want to, it's like, okay, well, you're free to
do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, like what I understood, what I understand from submission, that the explanations of Dr. Rashad and what we have read and learned so far, is that for example, in one of the videos, he's saying one who is like, if you're angry and you are at the point when you are angry, then you are not a submitter, because you disagree with something that God wanted to happen, right? You say, "Oh, I did this," so you're not a submitter anymore. So I think that in our life, like if we look at a daily basis, we try to be submitters all the time, right? In every situation. So we try to train ourselves, our souls, to be submissive in any way. Like if something happens to us, we still say, okay, no, God is doing this, so I submit to the will of God. And same counts for the commands. Like if God says you need to pray 5 times a day, and then we pray 5 times a day. But if you don't pray 5 times a day, then you're not submitted to them. The same counts for this command that God says. Like run away from them. If you say, no, I don't run away, then at that point, you're not a submitter. So, yeah. I can understand, in the beginning, maybe some people can have some doubts, about hypocrites. We had the same, like, for example, Salami, when we told him, listen, people, these are hypocrites, like, these are proof hypocrites. He said, yeah, but I need to see it with my own eyes. And he said, yeah, I'm firm, and I need to this and this and that. And then in the end, we saw what happened, right? There is a reason why those things happen. So that happens. Yeah, definitely. Like this happens if you don't follow the commands of God, right? And it's clearly like clear commands of God. That's what I think.
Inshallah, yeah.
Warn that person first of all.
I have a question. Do we have like any examples of how the messenger dealt with hypocrites?
Yeah, the last video, one of the last videos, right, where he speaks like with the microphone, you can see him clearly sitting right there. There you have some people doing some, acting hypocritical, and then he reads the Quran, a verse from the Quran in the end, and he say, yeah, you will have 2 kinds of people here. You will have the people who will make it to the high heaven, and you will have people who will be hypocrites going to the lowest pit of hell, and then. They will say, oh, weren't we with you? We were with you, right, at that point. And that is one example, how he acts towards those people. For example, he says to, if I'm not mistaken, it was Susan, right? When he tells her, like, okay, if you found some mistakes or anything, why didn't you come to me? And you spread things and you brought some division between the submitters, right? Like, he deals with them. Like on a very direct and harsh way. Like you end openly. It's not like this shouldn't be any secrets, right? And I think he had also similar things going on when when things are happening. The way how the devil works is he's like hiding underneath words or hiding underneath. Like we need to be extremely nice towards each other, right? Like the submitters, we need to be very nice to each other, but we see something that's really wrong and it's really hypocritical, then we need to like be extremely transparent and tell the things that are going on and not hide. And with that, then everything comes into the sunlight and everything is then clear. And the ones who need to go away, yeah, they go, and God arranges that, right? He makes sure that the ones who are like who are not meant for that place, they just go away in some kind of a way.
SubhanAllah, yeah. I see that Brother Jack, he dropped out of the call. But yeah, I mean, God says hypocrites drop out, right? And you see these clear examples and you try to tell these people, and they're like, I don't know that they're hypocrites. Like, prove to me that they're hypocrites, And then, yeah, I mean, okay, so if you don't want to see, that someone's a hypocrite, then you're not going to see, basically, right? And God says, God says here in the Quran that, have you befriended those, choose your friends carefully, 58:14 says, have you noted those who befriended people with whom God is angry? They neither belong with you nor with them. They deliberately swear lies. God has prepared for them a severe retribution. Miserable indeed is what they used to do. They use their oaths as a means of repelling from the path of God. Consequently, they have incurred a shameful retribution. And then it says, the day will come. Sorry, I'm skipping a few verses. It says, neither their money nor their children will help them against God. They have incurred the hellfire wherein they abide forever. The day will come when God resurrects them all. They will swear to him then, just as they swear to you now, thinking that they really are right. Indeed, they are the real liars. The devil has possessed them and caused them to disregard God's message. These are the party of the devil. Absolutely, the party of the devil are the losers. Surely those who oppose God and his messenger will be with the lowliest. God has decreed, I and my messengers will most assuredly win. God is powerful, almighty. Run for your life. It says, you will not find people who believe in God in the last day befriending those who oppose God and his messenger, even if they were their parents, their children, or their siblings, or their tribe. For these he decrees faith into their hearts and supports them with inspiration from him, and admits them into gardens with flowing streams, wherein they abide forever. God is pleased with them, and they are pleased with him. These are the party of God. Most assuredly, God's party are the winners. So, I think like in this, oh, no worries, brother. His phone died. So, no, I believe that, there are several hints in this, like, for example, like the people that were being questioned as not being hypocrites, God says that, you will not find people who believe in God in the last day befriending those who oppose God and his messenger. And God says, run for your life from these people, and even if they were your parents or your siblings or your children. So as we remember, some of these people were advocating, being good to their, nice to their parents if they were real hypocrites or enemies of God, that saying that we must. So that alone proves that these people were hypocrites, right?
Yeah, just that, right? I don't want to cut you off, but it's good to remind, like even for myself, brother. It says you shall remind, for the reminder benefits, and not just a reminder, just like do righteousness. That's awesome too. Or you idol worship him, I'm idol worship. That's good. But stuff like this too, because it how Satan works. But yeah, that was. Just that. There was other things I was thinking about to get to, but just that thing alone, it's like they're compromising, and the fact that these people are associating and didn't stand up or they're pretty much agreeing with that one sister who was going so hard on her point home about befriending people, like evil people, like because if my parent, like if this person evil, but if they're my parent, well, no, it's okay because they're my parents. Like, what difference does it make? Like, if an evil is going to be more of a test, choose as we just read, in the verses, befriending your parents, your siblings, and all that. If that's more beloved to you than God, then just wait. But
exactly. So it proves that these people are hypocrites, and then someone says, I don't believe they're hypocrites, and I will befriend them, and you are wrong, So then, that shows to us that there's something wrong with this picture.
Yeah, and we also have in Surah 9, verse 73, it says, this is another way we have in the Quran, he said, you shall be stern with the disbelievers. It's like, you prophet, strive against the disbelievers and the hypocrites, and be stern in dealing with them. Their destiny is hell with a miserable abode. So it's like, these same people are, oh, well, they're my parents, so I don't have to be, and this is, it's very, it becomes more true to me, about how there's traps in the Quran. I mean, the messenger of the covenant and even spoke about this. And this is, it like ties into the verse that God will give them enough rope. So they'll look at the Quran, right? And they'll see verses and they'll go somewhere else and they'll see something completely different, twisted, and they'll twist it, as Surah 3 says, the beginning of Surah 3, it says they twist the scripture in order to fit, I'm paraphrasing, in order to fit their own desires, and that's diseased in their hearts, So I mean, that's essentially what they've done. But yes, that's all I have.
Mashallah, yeah, that's definitely very good. Yeah, thank you for sharing, mashallah. So go ahead, Brother Jack.
Personally,
Yes.
sorry, something personally that I've noticed is I think people kind of like they'll dish out these titles like hypocrite or disbeliever, and it's like it comes too easily, I think as human beings, we can make mistakes in our opinions and stuff. Like, instead of, outright calling somebody a hypocrite because maybe they hold a deviant view on a particular issue, shouldn't we, talk to the individual first and understand why they came to their conclusion and, maybe give them some constructive criticism on that particular issue? Before we start, throwing out that they're hypocrites or disbelievers or.
Yeah,
because,
so I'm not sure, brother, who you have experiences with. So we can't speak for those people or those particular situations. But we're actually talking about real hypocrites, right? Because who the hypocrites are, is dictated not by our labels, but is dictated by what God says in the Quran, right? So regardless of other people who may be labeling or mischaracterizing people for whatever reason, I'm not saying that will not happen, right? That will happen and that does happen. Like, for example, when I'm not saying I'm not a hypocrite, maybe I am, who knows? But for the purpose of this discussion, I was told I was a hypocrite when I said that circumcision is not part of our religion, right? So yes, there are people who do that, right? But and so what God tells us to do is to do our due diligence, right? God has described to us who the hypocrites are, what are the signs. So when you judge, you can't judge a person based on your liking or disliking of the person and their views in particular, right? So you go by the Quran, and yes, you have to talk to these people, right? Because somebody could have a deviant view in the sense that they could be misinformed or misunderstand something, right? But let's say it comes to let's pick any topic, right? It comes to someone who's a hypocrite. So the thing is, a hypocrite is a very, very one of the most trickiest things. Like one example of a clear example of a hypocrite would be, let's say someone says, Muhammad wants to include Muhammad in his shahada. That's also hypocrite, right? That may be easy for you to distinguish because person's saying that, but you still can't say this person's a hypocrite because you have to do your part in trying to help these people. You try to bring them to the message, right? You try to talk to them. You exhaust all means. But the thing is, at the end of the day, right? If the person's a believer, at some point in time, and this goes for any disbeliever, not just a hypocrite, right? At some point in time, they should be on the right path. They will agree that they finally see the truth. Like you mentioned deviant view, right? So after a series of discussions or a series of logical conversations, you should see that this person should see the truth, right? But when you see that all of that effort is going nowhere, And they're not showing any signs, any positive signs that they're willing to see the truth, or they're actually seeing the truth. Then, based on the Quran, you have to conclude, right? Nevertheless, God tells us that we are not supposed to befriend the hypocrites. So you have to make a judgment call for your own good at one point or another, right? You can't, for example, continue to go against all your senses and say that, like, I'm gonna pretend this person is not a hypocrite, and I'm just gonna continue to do business with them as normal. Because if you do that, then you're also disobeying God, right? So, as the Messenger of the Covenant himself says, Satan's favorite principle is to say, "Do not judge," and he said, "This is God's scripture, and we can judge based on the scripture." And to go back to your previous question, there are many, mashallah, many good examples from the Messenger of the Covenant on how to deal with these people. As Brother Jafar mentioned earlier about the conference, I mean, that's a wonderful, wonderful video. And there's a few other audios where you can hear him have interactions with these people. They're hypocrites. Like when you talk about deviant view, like there's a very popular example here that comes to my mind about this guy named Eric. And he was from Switzerland. He was joining their Quran studies. Now, later, after he left, much later after he left, they realized that he was a spy, right? After putting things together. But while he was there, they didn't really know he was a spy. He wouldn't be there in the first place. But he was there attending their Quran studies. And as he was sharing these views, at the end, finally the Messenger of the Covenant told him, he said, "I think you should go back to Switzerland because you're a bad influence on everyone," right? He told him on his face. And there are other examples like Brother Jafar mentioned. In the conference, in front of everyone, he's telling this woman, he says, he says, "Go back to Canada." He says, "The devil is waiting for you there," right? And he's clearly confronting them about all those things that she's saying about him, and trying to find mistakes and all that, right? So he could clearly also, not go there and just continue to make excuses for a person. But you can only make excuses for someone for so long, right? You give them several chances and allow them. Eric, I mentioned Eric, and he says you have to run for your life, right? If someone declares their disbelief, and you know that at that point that this person is, not going to change his point of view, at least from the outset, that it seems like there is no hope for this person, then you're supposed to run for your life, right? By some miracle, can 20 years down the line, can someone change their message? Can someone change their heart? Anybody can, right? But that is not the criteria of the Quran. The criteria of the Quran is God has given us descriptions of these people, characteristics, attributes. Yeah, European. Yes, you're European too. So, just kidding. So, you see descriptions, attributes, and when these people follow those attributes, then you see that they fit. Like, this is how we distinguish, right? If they say if it talks like a, I hope I'm not butchering what do they say? It's like, if it talks like a duck, walks like a duck, most likely it is a duck, right? And then the other one I like is, well, maybe I don't like the other one so much, but the other one is like, if a pig wears a lipstick, it's still a pig, right? So people can say they believe all they want and try to sweet talk you and compliment you and pretend they're right. Like, for example, this woman Susan, she's really trying to butter up the messenger as he's really, he's really confronting her, and I don't want to use the word furious, but he looks furious, and he's telling her all these things, like, go Satan's waiting for you. It's like, oh, Rashad, I believe in you, you're the messenger of God, I was the one who stood with you, and I supported you, and all this stuff, and she's saying all this stuff, and he's really harsh with her, Like, when I saw that video, his interaction, I was like, this is harsh. You know, this, and we're supposed to be. And this is what God says in the Quran too, right? So, and he also, one of my favorite quotes from him also is, he said the believers, he gave the example of the believers, and just reflect on that he said they're like pussycats with each other, and they're like lions with the disbelievers and the hypocrites, right? And what does God say in the Quran? Same thing. He says we have to be harsh and stern with the disbelievers and hypocrites, and this is how we deal with them. So the believers, and the quality of the believers, real believers, is, according to the Quran, they're kind and compassionate with each other and harsh and stern against the disbelievers and hypocrites, right? And it's something that I think you feel in your heart. It's like comes natural. Like you don't have to force it out, and people who are apathetic, towards these things, it just shows that, something is wrong, something is not there. And you see them befriending these people, allying with these people. I mean, befriending is like one level, but then you start allying with them, you start siding with them, and you start collaborating, and then obviously that shows that we're not following God's commandments. But yeah, I mean, of course, you have to be certain when you categorize someone in this category, right? It's a serious thing, but people will do that too. People will misjudge people too, right? So, but you have to know that you judge based on Quran. You don't judge based on your personal ideas.
Yeah, and I want to add something, brother. From Jack was saying, so if a hypocrite comes back to submission, how should we deal with them? Should we be suspicious of them? So one of the things that I want to add is that, if someone, if we saw someone is a real hypocrite, and then he, before someone dies, they always can repent, right? They can repent, and then, but they need to prove that. Like in my opinion, they really need to show that they are really sorry in what they have done, or else I don't know. Like yeah, like of course we need to give them the chance, right, to be with us. But my opinion is that they need to prove that they are not hypocrites anymore, and they believe in what they are saying, and they truly believe in submission.
Yeah, brother. Mashallah, thank you, Jafar, brother. Also, I have another verse for you, brother Jack. It's Surah 9, verse 94. So this is, I'm going to read from verse 93 to 96. Okay, it says, the blame is on those who ask your permission to stay behind, even though they have no excuse. They have chosen to be with the sedentary. Consequently, God has sealed their hearts, and thus they do not attain any knowledge. And then it says, hard times serve to expose the hypocrites, right? Hard times serve to expose the hypocrites. And it says, they apologize to you when you return to them from battle. Say, do not apologize. We no longer trust you. God has informed us about you. God will see your works, and so will the messenger. Then you will be returned to the knower of all secrets and declarations. They will swear by God to you. They will swear by God to you. Imagine, when you return to them, that you may disregard them. Do disregard them. They're polluted, and their destiny is hell as a requital for the sins they have earned. They swear to you that you may pardon them. Even if you pardon them, God does not pardon such wicked people, right? So these verses show to me that there are people that will be exposed as hypocrites, right? So there's no such thing, for example, to me, as a hypocrite coming back to submission. A hypocrite is someone that is destined for hell, right? So they may show that they have maybe changed or something, right? But you can see if someone is exposed to you by God, they're exposed. There's no such thing as a hypocrite. Is not someone that can flip around in the sense that they're a hypocrite today and tomorrow they're a believer and now they're a hypocrite. A hypocrite is someone who is doomed, period, right? And God shows by their action that they're from that category. Now, once God has shown you the truth, what difference does it make how the person's acting in front of you? You know, if God has already exposed you and they fit the definition, yeah, if they personally reform in their own life, God knows that, right? But if God has already shown you that someone is from that category, and then they're trying to fool you, right? You know, it's like they say, you know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? I hope I didn't butcher that one. So that's on me then. At that time, you get fooled. You want to get fooled again by these people. You know, you do give them chances still, right? But if like hypothetically speaking, that scenario happens, and someone says, "No, I was right. I was being hypocritical, brother. You corrected me. You helped me so much. You helped me kill my ego. Now I'm a submitter, you know, or now I'm really seeing what you're saying." You can say, "Okay, fine," you know, and then you still don't see it. You know, you still see them doing the same thing. Then you can only blame yourself for being stupid at that time, right? Because God has shown you all the signs that a person's a hypocrite. And, you know, yeah, this show fake modesty, fake allegiance. Yeah, you can see like in these verses, you know, they're saying, "Oh, you know, I'm so sorry, like, you know, I'm with you, you know, I had my children, blah, 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 like I couldn't join the battle in this case," you know, like they're telling him. But they were already shown that they were hypocrites because when the time was there, when they were tested, they failed the test, and they are with the hypocrites. So the difference does it make how they act. If we call it suspicion, it's not really, because suspicion is when you you know, suspect something, but when something's already proven to you, like I can't unprove it, right? I can't say, well, I saw something, something was proven to me, but now it's unproven and I'm being suspicious. No, something was already proven at one point. Now it doesn't come in the category of suspicion. It comes in the category of you know, you just seeing what you witnessed, a proof, right? And so you're responsible for what you know. When you see someone is a hypocrite and you've come to that conclusion, then they are in the category of the hypocrite, right? Now, you may realize sometimes in some scenarios, maybe, that you thought someone was a hypocrite and they're not, right? That's different. You misjudged someone, you thought they were a hypocrite, but somehow you realize that you made a mistake. Yeah, that's fine, you know? Then accept your mistake and apologize to that person that you saw them as evil people. You fought against them. Like, for example, you know, people who fought the believers in wars, thinking that they were, you know, idol worshippers or whatever, or strayers, and then they accepted submission, you know, and they were welcome into submission because there are people that didn't know, right? And so, I mean, but you know, at the time that they were fighting, they're not supposed to say, well, they're not supposed to say that, okay, well, you know, you don't know, so just come and like attack me or infiltrate me or whatever. You know, you're still supposed to follow God's commandments as you deal with these people based on what you see, right? We are responsible for what we know, and we have to base our views based on what we know, right? If you make some mistake, maybe, you know, it's not that, you know, God is going to punish you for following his commandments. You have to follow God's commandments based on the best of your knowledge. Judge people based on the Quran, based on the best of your knowledge and what you see, and you know, then leave it to God after that, you know. If you're not sure that someone's a hypocrite or not, then don't make that judgment call until you're sure.
So that goes into like verifying. Like we should verify the claim. Like if somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, this person's a hypocrite because they believe this or they're doing this," then we should go and verify it, right?
Can you give me an example?
I can give you an example that I personally experienced. I won't mention any names.
Mm-hmm.
But there was an individual. There's another server outside of the submission server,
Mm-hmm.
and the individuals who run that particular server are said to be hypocrites.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, what makes them hypocrites? Oh, well, they don't accept the jinn companion for everybody. They say it's only for the unrighteous disbelievers. They don't accept all the teachings from the messenger, you know, etc., whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to these people and I'm asking them like about it because I want to verify it. And from my understanding anyway, there's like I'm asking them what they believe, how they practice, whatever, and I'm seeing like I don't see much of a difference from what I've seen in the submission server, right? It seems to me that okay, we have the essentials of submission, worship God alone, Quran alone, refer to the messenger, right? And then you have like these arbitrary issues that it really doesn't matter. At least, and I could be wrong. Like maybe within my limited understanding, but I don't know. Like, is there a difference? Okay, so like you brought up circumcision, right? Would you consider that an essential of submission, or is that something arbitrary that's open for discussion?
So you mean if someone wants to include that in the religion?
Right, like
it falls under idol worship. Yeah. So they basically want to include other teachings in the Quran. That's idol worship, right? So if they want to uphold other sources besides the Quran, how they bring idol worship exactly, as Brother John was saying. Quran alone isn't enough for them, and they want to bring other sources into the religion. Let's say they want to bring like unverified, unconfirmed verses in the Bible to justify it, right? What does that show? It shows that these people don't take the Quran as their only source of guidance, and so the moment you take anything other than the Quran as a source of law, that falls under idol worship, and these people are veiled. So yeah, I mean that's not something that you can say that because they're doing other four practices that they're also submitters and we should treat them the same way. No, God says we're more evil than those who fabricate lies and attribute them to God, right? So distorting, this is a scripture of Abraham, practical scripture of Abraham, right? Imagine the people who were adding the two false verses into the Quran, right? Would you say that those people were submitters? And it's okay, like they can add that? Like, no, people can't. Submission, is a gift to us from God, and it's something that we're not supposed to mess with and try to distort it, right? Distorting the scripture of God, attributing lies and innovations to God is a serious, serious thing, right? God says these are the most evil people. Like you think Hitler is the most evil person, or some other serial killer is the most evil person, or some pedophile, or some cannibal? No. People who fabricate lies to God are categorized in the Quran as the most evil people on earth. So people who are changing the religion from within, pretending to be submitters, that are hypocrites, they're going to the lowest pit of hell for that reason, because this is how they distort God's scripture. So this is not something that we can just take lightly, right? It's one thing, for example, that some person is not sure about something and you want to have a Quranic discussion with them, have a couple of conversations or exhaustive conversations where you show them everything. But then after you show them everything and they still insist on their ideas, then they don't really have much of an excuse at that time, right? So we have to consider that. Consider that in the equation, right? When we are making the decision on someone, whether they're a hypocrite or not. So even though, things may seem small, that doesn't really matter, Like, it's not like someone's adding 10 innovations and someone else is adding just one. So because the person's adding one, it's okay, versus someone who wants to add 10 innovations, right? I mean, it's the principle of it. You have to accept Quran as your only source of guidance, as your only source of law, and you're supposed to not fabricate lies, not innovate practices, satanic practice, especially when Satan is quoted in the Quran as saying, I will command them to distort God's creation, right? And then you say you find nothing wrong with it. Or it may be even beneficial for the people, to be mutilated. So then it's not acceptable, right? I mean, it's definitely not acceptable, and we shouldn't befriend these people.
So to kind of add to that, so I think there's a difference, right, to saying like with circumcision, for example, and there's other issues. There's people who can say, like God doesn't dictate this. This isn't in the Quran that like you have to do this, right? But maybe they have arguments like how it's beneficial, and maybe it's something that they suggest, but they acknowledge that it's not a commandment from God. What do you say about those people?
Sorry, I didn't understand. So they're saying that it's not how it's what do you mean how it's officiated, but it's not a commandment? Like, oh, you mean like they say, well, this is in the Bible, but it's not in the Quran?
No, I'm not saying that. Like, maybe like from a medical point of view, and I'm not a doctor or anything, so I don't know. But they can say like, oh, this procedure, it's beneficial in these ways, right? And they're submitters themselves, and they acknowledge like, yeah, this isn't something that God dictates in the Quran for us to do. Like, this isn't a commandment from God to do this.
Right. So the people that are saying that, first of all, they think that if you're saying that I'm doing it for a medical purpose and this is not a religious thing, that I can tell you that is also still incorrect, and they're still in religious violation of the Quran, right? Because God's they're saying that it's not a sin if you're doing it for, like, let's say medical reasons, right? Assuming. So first of all, you cannot go and, let's say, sever or chop off someone's finger for any reason, right? And you say my intention is that this person, like let's say I can't go and amputate someone and say, well, I amputated his leg against his will because I wanted to save him from getting cancer on his leg or something like that, right? Would you, and I'm doing it not because I'm severing his leg, not because it's a commandment, but I'm doing it because it can help him in the future, not if it had, I'm not saying someone has real cancer and he's dying and you chop off his leg, you're just doing preemptively. I just went and chopped off this random person's leg on the street because, I want to protect him from later on, so that he will never get cancer on his leg. And I saved him, and I'm not doing it because it's a religious commandment. It's the same thing, right? You're saying that you want to go and transgress against someone. I can't go slap a person, let's say, even, right? And say, I didn't slap him for religious reasons. I just slapped him because I think it's good for his blood circulation. Or maybe that's not a good example, right? But you can't, what I'm trying to say is, you can't beat up a person, let's say, and say, I didn't beat him up for religious reasons, but just because I wanted to help him for some other reasons, right? I wanted to beat him up so he can be a tough person or something like that, right? Because your actions are bad, right? So your intentions matter when your actions are right. You can't go kill a person, for example, and say, well, my intention was to, I don't know, make the world a better place, So
I think I'll use this example. I think it's more, okay, so is it prohibited to not eat meat? No. You can choose not to eat meat if you don't want to.
Eat you or eat meat?
You can't go to other people and say this is prohibited because God's not made it prohibited. We can't make things prohibited that God hasn't made prohibited, right? So if me as an individual, and I'm just using this as an example, decide that I don't want to eat, meat or chicken or whatever, that's fine. But I can't go to other people and dictate that they also shouldn't do that, right?
Okay, but I want to say that's your example to compare it to circumcision. That's a bad comparison because in one case, no harm is being done with eating meats, like if somebody chooses not to, but in another case, the circumcision, if I understand, you're trying to compare the two. It's completely different because in this case, you have someone being mutilated, being harmed, and we also know God is not the God of.
Yeah, you're advocating a transgression.
Yeah, you're advocating transgression
against another person. So
right.
from any angle you look at it, it's wrong.
Yeah, eating, not eating, and it's
Yeah.
not a prohibition. That's because you got to realize, like, things do not have to be spelled out
Mm-hmm.
in the Quran. Like,
Yeah.
in the Quran, it doesn't say, like, it's not spelled out that someone cuts me off, I'm going to flip them the bird. Like, it doesn't have to spell that out. That's inherently, you know not to do and transgress upon people. I mean, so in the same way, this should be common sense, not to violate someone's free will. I mean, just on that basis alone, just the violation of the free will is, should be like one. I mean, if the person wanted to do it themselves, I mean, that's let them decide. But it's not. I mean, that's just one point. I mean, there's dozens of other points that can,
So Jack,
yeah.
mashallah. Yeah, so Jack, you said that you can't dictate to a person what to do, right? You can't dictate to a person, but we're talking about whether that person is wrong in saying what they're saying, right? If a person says that circumcision is not a sin, right? Doing it to someone else is not a sin. If I'm saying it's not a religious commandment, it's still a sin because you're mutilating someone else's body against their will. You're depriving them of something God has given them, right? So I gave you the example of chopping off a finger, right? Someone says, I chopped off this person's finger because I don't want him to get infected, or someone comes and plucks out all your nails because they don't want them to get infected, and someone comes and chops off your ear because they don't want you to get ear infection, right? Antibiotics have been created already, so they can, if they really want to help you, even if you have an infection, they can give you antibiotics, right? But you go doing it to other people and saying it's not a sin just because it's not in your religion, just because I'm not doing it for religious reasons is wrong, I go and punch someone in the face and I'm saying that I'm not doing it for religious reasons, so it's fine. As long as I go punch people and I don't do it for religious reasons, it's not a sin. Does that make sense? Can I go punch people?
Right.
No.
And I just wanted to say,
So how can I go and amputate their body parts and mutilate them?
Yeah, two rights doesn't make it wrong, so it's...
No,
it's
two
like,
wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah, two I said that wrong. Two wrongs don't make a right. And I mean, in the same exact way, it's like, it comes back to the justification that the ends do not justify the means. I mean, that's satanic logic that, you see that with a lot of people, and it's just ingrained kind of into society, like robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's even an idiom that's used. I've heard people say that. It's like, oh, well, you have to pay Paul. This is good. It's righteous. You're paying your debt. But you're doing that on the basis of committing a sin, robbing Peter. So, I mean, it's the same thing. You can't, sit here and do harm in the name of doing the greater good, because, you're still committing heinous sins against that person, against yourself, and, even for non-religious reasons. And, that's
yeah, and I think, Jack, I'll give you an example, right? So this actually happened, right, with the messenger. So someone asked him about this thing, and Satan really used it actually, to confuse people. Now, someone asked the messenger about this thing called akika, which is a ritual that people do when a baby is born, right? And he says you can do anything as long as it's not religious, right? So, but like I said, you can't throw the baby outside the building, 2 floors high, drop the baby and say, well, messenger said I can do anything as long as it's not religious, right? That doesn't make any sense. So what he was asked about was akika, which is a ritual where Muslims, they sacrifice an animal when the baby is born. So he says, can I do it? He says, yeah, you can do it as long as it's not religious, right? But akika is completely harmless. Nobody's hurt. You just sacrifice an animal and feed the poor people. Nothing wrong with that, right? You can do it as long as you don't make it religious. If you say I'm doing it for religious reasons, that's an innovation. But severing a person's body part, against their will, harming them, hurting them, putting them under pain, bleeding, risking their life, all of that is a sin. So you can't do a sin for non-religious reasons and say, I'm just doing the sin, but it's okay because I'm doing it for non-religious reasons, right? So they're completely wrong. It doesn't make any sense. Also, it doesn't make any sense from any medical point of view because if you really do independent research on it, without these political biases that people have, like for example in the U.S. and stuff, and look at international papers and studies and associations, you will come to the conclusion that there's actually no medical benefits of circumcision whatsoever. So, and this is just a lie that is being pumped out, by these special, interest groups that promote circumcision. So there's no quote-unquote medical benefits of doing that, and you have to outweigh the pros and the cons, right? Like, imagine if you ever have an infection, like ear infection, and you go to a doctor and he says, yeah, just chop off your ear, right? They will never tell you that. You'll be looking at him strange, like, are you out of your mind? Like, can't you just prescribe me an antibiotic? Like, imagine you have a sinus infection and he says, yeah, just cut off all parts of your nose, just leave it open so there's no closed areas and there's no infection, right? No, just prescribe me an antibiotic. And like the things that they say about it, like for example, they say it prevents AIDS. Nothing prevents AIDS. I mean, they did some studies where they gave condoms to people who were circumcised and didn't educate the people who were not. And then they used it to make a study that, people who were circumcised had less chance of getting AIDS. So there's no real scientific reasoning for promoting that. If anything, it makes them more vulnerable to get diseases like that, right? And so those studies were done as a way to deceive people. Very few studies that were done to deceive people. So there's no medical benefits of that. So you can talk to these people and let them know that there are no medical benefits. Plus, they also don't believe that God created us. When God says He perfected the design of the human being and God created us in the best design, they don't believe that because they think it's better for you. Like, if God creates something and He says, I perfected it, can you make it better than God? Like, it's already, God already designed it and made it perfect. And you say, no, this is extra, this is not necessary, this is going to cause this issue and this issue. We can make it better by cutting it off, right? So that shows that you don't believe that God perfected the human being, right? God created all these other animals, He perfected them too in a way that's best for them. And you see all the animals, they wouldn't even have foreskins if there was beneficial for them, God. And you can't say, well, God perfected it, but this was one flaw that we have to fix, right? Because it's better for us.
I understand a little bit better now, but like the example, I haven't particularly looked into the issue. I guess what I didn't understand was like, okay, if somebody has this view that it is permissible, like how that would conflate with them being a hypocrite. It kind of makes a little bit of sense when you put it that way.
Yeah, if God calls someone the most evil person, and they're exhibiting all the signs of the most evil persons, and you remind them, and they're not taking any heed, then that's not a good sign, right? So it points in that direction, right? And so you will see that the hypocrites are mentioned by these traits, and it's difficult, but we have to judge that because God says we're not supposed to befriend them. We're supposed to treat them a certain way. We're supposed to protect ourselves, right? So you have to choose that whether you want to be protected or you don't want to be protected. If you don't make that decision, it's just only a matter of opening your eyes and distinguishing between right and wrong and good and bad, right? So we have to keep that open. We have to keep those senses open. It's not suspicion, it's caution, right? We have to be cautious. There's all kinds of deceit going on around us, right? So let's say you have a business or you have something else, and there's people out there that are going to try to trick you. Now, you have to be cautious, right? Let's say you're in war. You have to be cautious right? People are going to try, but that's not being suspicious. You have to watch out, right? Basically, of course, God is the one who's going to protect us and one who's going to keep us safe. But He also has given us these commandments to protect us, right? And if we don't follow the commandments and then we get hurt, then we are responsible for not practicing the commandments, right? God has said, for example, He has given us shields to protect us in war. But if someone says, "Well, I don't care about the shields because if God wants to protect me, I'll be protected," right? And they don't get the shield, and then they get hurt, and like, yeah, well, God says you have to protect yourself. He has made these things for you, so use them, and then trust God, of course. But you can't just disregard these commandments, right? For any other reason, right? Like to say, like in this case, like you don't want to be suspicious or you don't want to misjudge. No, you're not being suspicious. You're following God's commandments by doing what God says. As long as you do it as God says, as long as you make the judgments based on the Quran. And with the example that you gave about the people, actually, I think that's a different situation in the sense that you have to see if they're saying, like, let's say, someone did this or that, or someone saying this, that you have to verify too, right? But the thing is, if someone says someone's a hypocrite, and you can't go to the person and say, hey, someone told me you're a hypocrite. Are you a hypocrite? Right? Or let's say, someone says, so-and-so killed, your neighbor next door, he killed his wife, and it says his wife is dead, and you go to the neighbor and you want to go verify. It's like, hey, did you kill your wife? And he says no, and then you say, okay, I verified, my neighbor told me that he killed his wife, and I went and asked the killer, and he said, no, I didn't. So you have to keep all these factors in mind. Certain things,
Right.
Certain things you'll have to investigate, and certain things you can just verify from the person themselves, right?
So, what I did personally was I went to these two individuals and I just asked them, what do you guys believe?
Mm-hmm.
What do you believe concerning this issue or this topic? And I don't know. It was kind of, and like I said, I could be wrong, and I'm open to that possibility. But it just seemed that it was small, minute, arbitrary things that it has no bearing on, worshiping God alone and following the Quran and referring back to the messenger, right?
So, okay, let's say...
maybe it's political issues or whatever,
But what you mentioned seems like serious things. Like, if they're saying that we don't have jinn companions individually, that's a serious departure from the truth, right?
Yeah, because I think, Brother Jack, to me, what that it's saying more than that. So on the surface, yeah, it seems like, okay, they say XYZ, they don't have jinn companions, but what that actually translates to is I disbelieve in the messenger of the covenant and the Quran. So something small like that is actually
pretty big.
It's like a side effect, or it's like emanating of a more serious problem with these people that they disbelieve in the messenger of the covenant, which means they're pretty much they're a disbeliever altogether, and so that's kind of why these things are so serious, because it's it also ties back into the verse how they talk about the disbelievers and the hypocrites, they only accept the Quran partially. So you have to be completely sold on God, completely sold on His messenger, and work on your doubts, and God will help you with that stuff.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the conversation. It's been fruitful to me personally, because I guess I kind of wasn't looking at it with that kind of perspective. It was kind of more, okay, they have a disagreement on this, like the jinn companion, for example. I've read, that the messenger says we all have a jinn companion from birth to death. So obviously that would mean every human being. And they just happen to have a disagreement. But I understand better now.
Like for example, for me, I had the issue. I wouldn't even say issue, but like it's not the same as these people. Like because there's a difference. Like in one of the last things I kind of was the age of 40, right? But I was never combative about it. I never argued with it. I just kind of kept it to myself, and then I looked at the evidence, and I didn't make like a firm judgment. Age of 40. But even if someone had done that, there's still like room for to be redeemed. But yeah, as I said earlier, it would be better for these people, to err in a way of not being so sure in themselves and their opinions and uphold the messenger. But yeah, that just like reflects complete disbelief in the messenger.
And the Quran,
yeah, and the Quran too, because it's
yeah.
Excuse me, like I said, the Quran, because the messenger, he just comes with what's in the Quran, and it was also one of his duties to, as we see, one of the appendixes, I think, or he had these specific duties as his messenger of the covenant that dealt with this. With the Quran, that it was part of his duties, So, and then the thing is, it's you have to take this like the way I look at it, and I've come to just through experience. Like this stuff is super serious, because at the end of the day, like you have your own neck to worry about. I have my own neck, and stuff like this is because you don't want to become like these people. Because if you hang around with these people for too long, these doubts and these. It's like a fungus or like a virus, it can fester if you don't get rid of it, and so yeah, that's important. Glad to you ask these questions, brother.
Yeah, mashallah.
Yeah,
I think also one thing I'd like to add, so we're talking about the difference between a fake submitter and a true submitter, right? Hypocrite is a fake submitter. And it says in the what is this? This is the introduction, right? If you go into the introduction, this is going to be on where is that? One sec, I lost my page here. So this is going to be an introduction, and it says. A criterion of the true submitters is that they find nothing objectionable in the Quran, right? So if a person is really a submitter, they'll accept everything. We can, for example, disagree on how many men were with Moses. You say 50 and I say like 60, or did Moses I don't know, something or not, or things like that are not relevant, right? But things that are in the Quran that are clear, that are spelled out to us, the commandments, the fundamentals, parts of our religion, things that are clearly spelled out, mentioned in the Quran, explained by the messenger from the Quran also, right? So all those things, a true submitter will not find anything objectionable, right? Like, for example, these people find it objectionable that we have to commemorate God all the time. Like, no, God says commemorate God all the time, but they're like, no, it's too difficult. You're making the religion difficult, right? God says you commemorate God day and night, commemorate Him every chance we get. We must remember God, make every excuse. And then someone says something like that, right? So that's a sign. And they come and present some other thing, let's say like we talked about the hypocrites, and they say, well, it's fine if the hypocrites are my parents. I can be nice to them. Well, that's another thing they find objectionable now because clear verses in the Quran are saying that, right? So all these things will show you that, yeah, this person, more than likely, and God is showing you these signs, like don't ignore them, Jack. It's like God is showing you these signs that, okay, I have to take them, these things into account, right? Because clearly it's not fitting the picture now. And sometimes we may see things that are maybe looking minor, but they're not, Like, it really, this exact thing was actually said to me, when this whole circumcision debate was going on. So listen, this one person came and says, And even the way they said it was kind of grossed me out a little bit. And they're saying, "Oh, you're arguing about the little thing." They said that little thing, in submission. It's like, yeah, it's a little thing that you don't have to talk about even because it creates division. And there's a bunch of people that jumped on that bandwagon, and they went with this idea, yeah, we can just ignore that these things exist and just like brush these things under the rug. And you know why? Because Satan wants to silently propagate these things into the religion. So he doesn't want people to point them out. Like if people are propagating that, they just want them to be allowed to do that freely and secretly or openly, whatever, Like he doesn't want it to be stopped. Basically, if you start talking about it, of course, you're creating resistance against Satan from promoting falsehood into the religion, and he doesn't like that, right?
Well, I think John brought up a good point about like the age of 40, because that's something that personally, like I had to kind of come to terms with. So like when you look at things on the surface level without talking about it and without, looking into it, right? So my initial thoughts were like, okay, how could this be? It doesn't really make sense because, God is the most just. Like how can he just let anyone who dies before the age of 40, no matter how horrible of people that they were, like how could he let them into heaven? But then like when we got into talking about it and understand, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, right? So it's kind of the same thing. Like if we don't talk about it, then it just creates more confusion. And it kind of goes into, we hear and we obey. That's what God tells us to do. So, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say ChatGPT. I was saying we have to. Sorry, threw me off. John, yeah, I mean, mashallah, I was going to say the age of 40 is definitely a hard thing for people to accept, at the beginning specifically. I had the same, it was definitely, I didn't disagree with it, clearly like that, but, I was finding it very hard to understand in the beginning. I was really, really, how is that possible? But it shows how merciful God is, how gracious he is. He knows, and that is all about being just because he knows everybody's circumstances, right? And it's he doesn't, ignore anything, and he knows their circumstances. Say, for example, what's her name? Marilyn Monroe, dies under the age of 40, and people are like, well, she was so provocative and sexually exposing her body all the time and all this stuff. But she had, God knows exactly what she knew, what her life circumstances were, what she went through. Probably some people may even say stuff about her IQ level or something. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, but God knows exactly what everybody's situation is. What I can see, a lot of times, these people that are, they're just very innocent, they have there's very they may be making wrong choices out of ignorance, but they're very inherently they're innocent people, and God knows those things, right? So he doesn't overlook that, and he knows which souls are good, which souls are bad. And even though they might be doing these things on the outside, God knows that they really don't. They're really not responsible, but he allows them to go before that time, right? Because he could very well, if God understands that a person truly deserves to go to hell, he could allow them to live longer, after 40, for sure. People die after their 40th birthday, sometimes, and God knows, some of the people try to commit suicide before 40 and they fail, and then they end up dying after 40, right? So God knows who deserves to go to hell and who doesn't, God doesn't make any mistakes, mashallah. So
Yeah, he also gave just the example of Christina Onassis. I think she passed away when she was 38, but I mean, I looked into some of her history, and I mean, it's not a whole lot different than the example you just gave. He's different, but I mean, if you look, you read more, and I mean, she was really abused, and I mean, God, like you said, God knows.
Of course.
I mean, he said God knows her situation, and I mean, she literally had like billions upon billions. Her father was like the richest man on like number one or two on earth at the time. And I mean, that's another great example. Even with all her billions, look how miserable she was. She tried taking her life a few different occasions, and then she finally succeeded. And it also, I mean, it's like for me too, what helped me is that it's, I guess when I understood, it's like, who am I to deny these people, or like who am I like to, and it's also kind of, I think, like a test for ourselves and our egos on like questioning God's mercy, because it's like when I started reflecting more on the examples of like Moses and that one of God's servants, it's like God is omnipotent. I'm just like, for all I know, it's like I'm like my insight is like a piece of dust in like a galaxy. Like, I mean, even smaller than that. I mean, it's like compared to God's wisdom, So it's like that's yeah, that's kind of what when I started reflecting on that stuff. But like Brother Suleman said, it's like, yeah, I never I pondered on it for some time, but then God helped me. And I think one of the biggest things too is ego, because like some of the other things, like I pondered on for some time. Thank God He helped me. When I look back on it, it was for me personally, it was I think it was like parts of the ego that are very hidden, I think, to the human being. And it wasn't until like I asked God for help, that's when He helped me, Mashallah.
So I'll work better, God willing, on better identifying signs of the hypocrites and hypocrisy, because I really don't want to fall into that trap. It's kind of a scary thing, really. That I mean, it took you explaining it to be like, okay, yeah, I could see, why they would be hypocrites. Like, whereas like before this conversation, I was like, I really don't see it. We have some disagreements, but so God willing, I'll work harder on identifying the signs and stuff.
So. All right, so are there any other comments or questions from anyone? All right, so thank you all for joining us, mashallah, for this study. Thank you for joining us. God bless you. God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody.